I didn't set out to find peace that day. I set out to disappear. The world had become too loud, too cruel, too demanding. Every corner I turned seemed to whisper that I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong anywhere. I had been carrying those voices for so long they'd become a constant hum beneath my skin. When I woke that morning, the heaviness on my chest felt unbearable. I thought maybe if I walk far enough, deep enough, I can silence it all. So I drove until the road narrowed and the forest began to swallow the sky. I parked without thinking, left my phone in the glove compartment, and started walking. No destination, no plan, just me, my breath, and the woods. The trees stood tall and indifferent. They didn't care about my failures, my broken family ties, the loneliness that had become a second skin. Each branch seemed to weave a cage of shadows overhead, and I welcomed it. If the world didn't want me, maybe the forest would. As I walked deeper, the sounds of the highway faded. The only noises were the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the distant call of a bird I couldn't name. My thoughts were louder than both. You're wasting your life. No one would notice if you didn't come back. Even your friends are too busy to care. I told myself I wasn't suicidal. Not really. I just wanted to rest, to stop fighting every single day to prove I deserved to breathe. But as the sunlight dimmed through the trees, I couldn't deny the thought that had been circling my mind. Maybe if I never found my way back, it would be easier for everyone. The forest smelled of damp moss and pine needles. The air grew cooler the deeper I went, and a strange sense of relief trickled into me. Out here, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to smile, or work, or explain why I felt so hollow. Out here, I could simply vanish. My legs carried me without direction, following deer trails and dry creek beds until I realized I didn't know how long I'd been walking. Hours, maybe. The shadows lengthened, and the woods pressed closer, dense and unwelcoming. Panic stirred faintly at the edges of my exhaustion, but I pushed it down. Getting lost was almost the point, wasn't it? I stopped by a fallen log and sat down. The bark was damp, soaking into the back of my jeans, but I didn't care. I buried my face in my hands, pressing hard against my eyes until little sparks of light danced in the darkness. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself. My voice sounded small, weak, like it didn't even belong to me. The silence answered, heavy, complete. When I lifted my head again, I thought I saw movement between the trees. At first, I dismissed it, probably a deer, maybe even a coyote. But then I caught sight of something more distinct. A figure moving steadily through the woods. My heart skipped. Instinct told me to shrink back, hide, but it was too late. The man had already spotted me. He stepped into the clearing, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a forest green shirt tucked into rugged pants, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face. The patches on his shirt caught the dim light. A park ranger. Of all the people I could have run into, it had to be someone trained to notice everything. Someone whose job was to keep an eye on lost souls wandering where they shouldn't. He paused a few feet away, studying me. I felt exposed, like he could see right through the flimsy mask I wore. His gaze wasn't sharp or accusing, though. It was steady, observant, patient in a way that unnerved me. I shifted uncomfortably on the log, pretending to look at my boots. My chest tightened, bracing for judgment, for questions I didn't want to answer. Then, in a low voice, almost like he was talking to himself, I heard him murmur, "What's this pretty boy going to do out here all alone?" The words cut through me. Not harshly, but unexpectedly. Pretty boy. No one had ever said that to me before, not in a way that sounded gentle. It wasn't mocking. It was more like curiosity, tinged with concern. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. He took another step closer, slow and deliberate, as though I were a skittish animal he didn't want to scare off. "Hey," he said softly. "You all right?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat clenched shut, heavy with everything I couldn't say. "No, I'm not all right. I'm falling apart. I came here because I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending." All I managed was a shrug, small and useless. He didn't push. He crouched down a safe distance away, lowering himself to my level. His eyes were calm, steady, like he'd done this before, with lost hikers, frightened campers, people who didn't know which way was out. "You look like you've been out here a while," he said. "It gets dark fast in these woods. Not the best place to be wandering." There was no accusation in his tone, just quiet fact. I nodded faintly, still avoiding his gaze. "Tell you what," he continued. "My cabin isn't far from here. Warm fire, food, maybe some coffee. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Just let me help you find a safe spot for the night." Something in me cracked at those words. Safe spot. I hadn't felt safe in months, maybe years. The forest had seemed like an escape, but now that night was pressing in. The truth was clear. I didn't want to disappear. Not really. I just didn't know how to keep going. I glanced up, finally meeting his eyes. They weren't demanding. They weren't pitying. They simply waited, offering me the choice I didn't think I had anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to work. "Okay," I whispered. His lips curved into the faintest smile, and he stood, offering me his hand. "All right then, come on. Let's get you out of here." As I placed my trembling hand in his, I had no idea that this stranger, the park ranger who'd found me at the edge of giving up, would become the reason I chose to stay. The first night in his cabin felt like stepping into a different world. The ranger lit a fire in the old stone hearth, the flames snapping and spitting, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. He brewed coffee, though I barely touched mine. It sat cooling in my hands while I stared at the floor, trying to hold myself together. He didn't press me right away. That was the surprising part. Most people in my life had either demanded explanations or offered empty advice. He just sat across from me, sipping his drink, letting the silence stretch without letting it feel suffocating. Finally, he said, "You don't have to tell me anything, but if you want to, I'm here." Something about the way he said it, steady, not insistent, broke down a little of my guard. I stared into the fire for a long moment before words slipped out, unplanned. "I don't even know what I'm doing anymore," I murmured. "It's like every day I wake up and I don't see a reason for it. Like I'm just wasting space." My voice cracked at the end, and I hated how small it sounded. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's not wasting space," he said quietly. "That's being human. We all feel that sometimes." I shook my head. "Not like this. It's been months. Years, maybe. I've tried pretending everything's fine, but I can't keep up. And my family," my throat tightened. "They don't get it. They never really did. It's like I was this disappointment they didn't ask for. And the older I get, the clearer it feels that I'll never measure up." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. I blinked against the heat in my eyes, ashamed of how quickly the words were spilling out. I hadn't planned to tell him anything, but his presence, the calm way he just listened, made it impossible to keep everything locked up. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer pity. He just let me speak. "I thought maybe if I disappeared," I whispered, "it would make things easier. For them. For me. No one would have to deal with me anymore." Silence pressed down after that confession, heavier than the forest had been. I half expected him to flinch, to scold, to call me dramatic. But when I finally looked up, his expression wasn't judgment. It was something softer, deeper. "I know what that feels like," he said simply. I blinked, startled. "You do?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the fire. "Yeah, a long time ago. Before this job, before I found something worth staying for. I was in a bad place too. Different reasons, maybe, but the same storm in your head. I remember nights where I thought about ending it. Nights I couldn't see past the pain." His voice was low, steady, but there was weight behind it. Not the weight of a lecture of experience. "What changed?" I asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. He gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "Someone noticed. A friend who wouldn't give up on me. He dragged me outside, made me go hiking with him even when I wanted to stay curled in bed. He kept showing up until I started to believe I was worth showing up for. And then I found this job. Being out here, protecting this land, helping people. It gave me purpose. He looked at me then, his gaze steady. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. You just need a reason to take the next step. Sometimes that reason is small. Sometimes it's a person. The words sank into me like water into dry soil. My chest ached, but for the first time in a long while, it wasn't from emptiness. It was from the fragile hope that maybe he was right. I let out a shaky laugh, trying to deflect. So what? You're saying I just need a forest and a friend? Not just any friend, he said quietly. The right kind. Someone who sees you. Not what you've failed at. Not what you think you're missing. Just you. Our eyes met then, and something passed between us that I couldn't name. The firelight flickered across his face, catching the faint lines around his eyes, the steadiness of his jaw. He looked rugged, worn in the way the earth itself is solid, enduring. And for a terrifying moment, I realized how much I wanted to lean into that steadiness. I looked away quickly, pretending to focus on my cooling coffee. My cheeks burned. He didn't call me out, but I could feel the air shift between us. Not romantic, not yet. Just a pull. The quiet spark of something unspoken. I don't know why you're helping me, I admitted finally. Because you needed it, he said simply. And because I've been where you are. No one deserves to go through that alone. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, a low and steady whisper. Inside, the cabin felt warmer, safer than it should have for someone who had walked into it lost and broken just hours ago. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if I'd ever find purpose or prove my family wrong or feel like I belonged in the world. But in that moment, sitting across from him, I felt something I hadn't in a long time seen. I swallowed hard, nodding. Thank you. He gave me a small smile. You don't have to thank me. Just stay. Rest. One step at a time. And though we both turned back to the fire, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of trust, of shared shadows, of the faintest beginnings of something neither of us dared to name. The days blurred together in the cabin, though each one felt heavier with meaning than the last. Time, which had once been a burden, suddenly slowed down, stretching into moments I wanted to hold on to. I hadn't expected to stay more than a night, but somehow, I found myself waking up each morning to the crackle of the ranger's fire, the smell of coffee, and the quiet reassurance of his presence. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that I would find my way back eventually. But every small routine we shared wove a thread I couldn't pull free from. Breakfasts were simple: eggs, toast, sometimes oatmeal. He'd set a plate in front of me without a word, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. I'd mumble thanks, and he'd just nod, his eyes soft even when he didn't smile. Lunches were lighter, sometimes eaten outside on a fallen log while the forest stretched around us. And dinners, those were my favorite. The cabin glowed in the firelight, shadows dancing along the walls, the two of us sitting close enough that the silence felt companionable rather than awkward. It wasn't just the meals. It was the way he moved around the cabin with practiced ease, tending to the fire, mending tools, checking the maps spread out on the table. It was how he always made sure I had water nearby, how he'd glance at me when I grew too quiet, as though reminding me I wasn't alone anymore. One afternoon, he decided to take me out on a walk through the woods. You should know the basics, he said, handing me a small compass. Even if you never use it, it helps to feel like you have direction. The word struck me harder than it should have. Direction. Something I had been without for so long. He showed me how to read the compass, how to line it with a map. His hands were steady as he guided mine, his fingers brushing against my wrist. The contact was brief, but it sent a ripple through me that I tried desperately to ignore. I told myself it was nothing, just teaching, just instruction. But the warmth of his skin lingered long after he pulled away. See, he said, pointing toward the ridge. If you ever feel lost, look for landmarks. The compass will give you bearing, but the land tells its own story. I nodded, trying to focus on the lesson, though my attention kept drifting back to him. The way his voice softened when he explained things, the patience in his eyes. He wasn't just teaching me how to navigate the forest, He was teaching me how to breathe again, how to believe that I could move forward without sinking. Later, he knelt by a pile of dry leaves and twigs, showing me how to build a fire from nothing. I watched as sparks caught, flame rising from his careful work. "Your turn," he said, stepping back. I fumbled through the motions, clumsy at first. He didn't laugh or criticize. He crouched beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body. "Not bad," he murmured when the flame finally held. "See, you can do more than you think." Those words settled deep inside me. For years, I had convinced myself that I couldn't do anything right, that every step I took led to failure. But here he was, reminding me of something small yet powerful. I was capable, even if it was just coaxing a flame from dry leaves. The days followed that rhythm. Walks in the woods, lessons in survival, evenings by the fire. He'd tell me stories about the forest, the hikers he'd helped, the storms he'd weathered, the quiet nights where the only sound was the wind through the trees. I found myself telling him more too. Not everything, not yet, but pieces of myself I'd buried. Sometimes, the silences between us said more than words ever could. I noticed the little things. How his eyes crinkled when he smiled, even if it was rare. How he hummed softly when he chopped wood. How careful his hands were when he handed me something, as though even the smallest gesture deserved attention. Beneath his strong exterior, the broad shoulders, the rugged presence, there was a gentleness that unsettled me in the best way. It was in the way he'd steady me when I tripped over roots, the way he'd pass me a blanket without asking if I was cold, the way his voice softened whenever he said my name. And then there were the accidental touches. His hand brushing mine when we reached for the same pot. His shoulder bumping against me as we walked the narrow trail. Each one small, fleeting, but loaded with something I couldn't quite admit to myself. One evening, as the fire burned low, we sat side by side on the couch. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. I could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing, feel the warmth radiating from him. My hand rested on the cushion between us, and for a heartbeat, I swore his fingers twitched as though to close the space. Neither of us moved. The longing was there, undeniable, yet unspoken. It sat between us like the fire, warm, alive, flickering with possibility. I turned my eyes back to the flames, afraid of what I might see if I looked at him too long. But in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, slowly, gently, in the presence of someone who made me believe it was worth it. And though I couldn't say it out loud, I knew it. I was beginning to fall. I had almost convinced myself I was healing. The forest walks, the fire-building lessons, the quiet meals shared in silence or soft laughter. It all wove a fragile cocoon around me. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Maybe too safe. Because when safety came, so did the memories. The first nightmare struck in the middle of the night. I woke with a strangled cry, drenched in sweat, my chest aching like I'd been crushed. The dream itself blurred as soon as I opened my eyes, faces twisting into disappointment, my family's voices sharp with rejection, laughter at my expense. But the feeling stayed gnawing at me. I pressed my palms into my eyes, shaking, trying not to sob out loud. The ranger was just in the next room, and the last thing I wanted was to wake him. But the walls felt too close, the air too heavy. Before I knew it, I was outside, barefoot on the cold dirt, gasping for air like I was drowning. My thoughts spiraled fast. You don't belong here. You'll only ruin this too. He'll get tired of you like everyone else does. I started walking, not toward anywhere, just away. My chest hurt, my legs moved without plan. All I knew was that if I kept going, maybe the shame would loosen its grip. Behind me, the cabin door creaked open. "Hey!" His voice cut through the dark, steady and sharp. "Where are you going?" The longing was there, undeniable, yet unspoken. It sat between us like the fire, warm, alive, flickering with possibility. I turned my eyes back to the flames, afraid of what I might see if I looked at him too long. But in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, Slowly, gently, in the presence of someone who made me believe it was worth it. And though I couldn't say it out loud, I knew it. I was beginning to fall. I had almost convinced myself I was healing. The forest walks, the fire-building lessons, the quiet meals shared in silence or soft laughter. It all wove a fragile cocoon around me. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Maybe too safe. Because when safety came, so did the memories. The first nightmare struck in the middle of the night. I woke with a strangled cry, drenched in sweat, my chest aching like I'd been crushed. The dream itself blurred as soon as I opened my eyes. Faces twisting into disappointment. My family's voices sharp with rejection. Laughter at my expense. But the feeling stayed, gnawing at me. I pressed my palms into my eyes, shaking, trying not to sob out loud. The ranger was just in the next room, and the last thing I wanted was to wake him. But the walls felt too close, the air too heavy. Before I knew it, I was outside, barefoot on the cold dirt, gasping for air like I was drowning. My thoughts spiraled fast. You don't belong here. You'll only ruin this too. He'll get tired of you like everyone else does. I started walking, not toward anywhere, just away. My chest hurt, my legs moved without plan. All I knew was that if I kept going, maybe the shame would loosen its grip. Behind me, the cabin door creaked open. "Hey!" His voice cut through the dark, steady and sharp. "Where are you going?" His eyes flicked to the sky for a moment before settling back on me. Someone wouldn't let go of me. My friend sat outside my door all night, refusing to leave. He didn't say much, just kept reminding me that I mattered, even when I couldn't see it. And eventually, I started to believe him, just enough to put the gun down. The silence between us was thick with shared weight. His confession wasn't just words. It was a lifeline, stretched out in the dark. "I'm not telling you this to scare you," he continued. "I'm telling you because I've been where you are, and I made it out, and so can you. You don't need to see the whole path right now. You just need to stay for the next step. And then the one after that." My chest heaved, torn between shame and something deeper. Hope, fragile and trembling. The tears came then, unrestrained, spilling down my face. "I'm so tired," I whispered. "So damn tired." Without hesitation, he reached forward, pulling me into his arms. I stiffened at first, unaccustomed to the warmth of another body holding mine. But then I broke, collapsing against him, burying my face in his shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured into my hair, his hand steady against my back. "Let it out. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." I sobbed harder, clutching at his shirt like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. His embrace was firm, anchoring but gentle too, as if he knew exactly how close I was to shattering. We stayed like that, kneeling in the dirt under the pale light of the moon, the forest silent around us. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was something deeper than anything I'd known. Tenderness, safety, the raw proof that I wasn't invisible. When the storm inside me finally quieted, he eased back just enough to look at me. His hand brushed a tear from my cheek, his touch careful. "You're still here," he said softly. "That's enough." For the first time in a long while, I almost believed him. In the days that followed my breaking point, something shifted between us. It wasn't abrupt or dramatic, no lightning bolt or sudden declaration, but quiet, gradual, like a river changing course. I could feel it in the silences we shared, in the way his presence wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't realize I needed. I started to notice things I hadn't before. The way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. The softness in his voice when he asked if I'd eaten enough, or if I wanted another blanket by the fire. He had always been kind, but now there was something gentler beneath the strength, something that made my chest ache in a way I didn't want to admit. One afternoon, we sat outside on the porch, mugs of coffee warming our hands as the sun dipped low behind the trees. The forest glowed gold, every leaf rimmed with fire. He leaned back against the railing, eyes half closed, the light catching in his hair. "You ever notice how the woods go quiet right before sunset?" he asked. I tilted my head. "Quiet?" Listen. I did. And he was right. The birds had hushed. The wind had softened. Even the insects seemed to pause. The world held its breath, just for a moment. It's like the forest is waiting, he said softly. Something about the way he said it, his voice low and thoughtful, sent a shiver through me. I wanted to ask him what he was waiting for, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I laughed lightly, deflecting. You make it sound poetic. He smiled, and it wasn't the small, guarded smile I'd seen before. It was open, unrestrained, lighting his whole face. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Later, inside the cabin, the mood shifted again. I had been clumsy while trying to help with dinner, nearly knocking over a pot of stew. He steadied it with one hand, his other brushing against mine. We both froze, eyes locking. The contact was fleeting, but the warmth lingered, electric and unspoken. He cleared his throat, pulling back. Careful, he murmured. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice was too thin. Guess I'm not cut out for kitchen duty. You're learning, he said, his tone softer than the words themselves. The evenings became the hardest because that was when the intimacy felt strongest. After dinner, we'd sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence. He'd tell me stories about his past. Nothing earth-shattering, but enough to reveal cracks in the armor he wore. I learned about his first year on the job, when a storm stranded him in the forest for 2 days with nothing but a soaked tent and stubborn determination. He laughed as he told it, but I could hear the vulnerability in the way his voice wavered. And I found myself laughing with him, really laughing, the kind that shook out of me before I could stop it. It startled me at first, the sound foreign after months of silence and despair. But he smiled at it like it was the best sound in the world, and suddenly, I wanted to laugh more. It was in those small moments, shared laughter, hands brushing, eyes lingering, that the air between us grew charged. I began to wonder if he felt it too. One night, after the fire had burned low, I caught him watching me. His gaze was steady, not curious or cautious, but warm, searching, like he was memorizing me. My chest tightened, my stomach nodded. What? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He blinked, as if startled, and shook his head. Nothing, just thinking. About what? He hesitated, his lips parting like he was on the edge of saying something important. But then he pressed them together, glanced away, and the moment passed. I wanted to push, to demand the truth, but fear held me back. Fear that if I reached too far, I'd break the fragile peace we'd built. So I stayed quiet. The tension grew unbearable sometimes, especially in the quiet hours. Once, as we sat on the couch, our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. His hand rested on his knee, mine on the cushion between us, close enough that I swore I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The silence thickened. His breathing slowed, matching mine, and when I finally gathered the courage to glance at him, his eyes were already on me. For one heartbeat, everything else disappeared. The fire, the cabin, the forest beyond the walls. There was only him and me, and the space between us that suddenly felt impossibly small. His gaze dropped briefly to my lips, and I felt my pulse spike. My body leaned forward just a fraction without my permission. And for a moment, one fragile, suspended moment, I thought it would happen. That we would close the space, that all the unspoken words would finally spill into something real. But he inhaled sharply, turning his head just enough to break the spell. I froze, heat rushing to my face. Getting late, he muttered, his voice rougher than usual. He stood, busying himself with stirring the fire. I sat there, heart pounding, pretending not to notice the way his hands trembled slightly as he worked. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't speak of it either. But the almost lingered in the air, heavy with promise, too fragile to touch. And as I lay awake later, staring at the cabin ceiling, I knew one thing with aching certainty. Whatever was building between us, it wasn't going away. I hadn't noticed it at first, the shift inside me. It came gradually, like dawn seeping through a forest canopy. soft and unannounced. But one morning I woke to the smell of coffee, the fire already crackling in the hearth, and I realized something startling. I didn't want to disappear anymore. It wasn't that the darkness had vanished. The scars, the doubts, the voices that whispered I wasn't enough, they still lived in me. But now there was something stronger pulling me forward. A steady hand that reminded me to eat, a voice that taught me to light a fire, eyes that looked at me like I was worth more than my worst days. The ranger had become that reason, not in some sudden fairy tale way, but in the quiet persistence of his presence. He was proof that maybe, just maybe, love of life of another person could grow even in the most unexpected places. I thought of the first night, when I'd nearly run from the cabin, convinced I was too broken to stay. I thought of how he'd found me in the dirt, pulled me into his arms, and told me my scars weren't weakness but survival. Those words echoed in me now, steadying me whenever doubt tried to take hold. One evening, as autumn began to sharpen the air, we sat on the porch again. The sky bled orange into violet, stars threatening to break through. I wrapped my arms around myself, but before I could shiver, he draped a blanket across my shoulders. "You always forget to grab one," he said softly. I smiled faintly. "Maybe I just like seeing if you'll notice." His eyes met mine, and for once he didn't look away. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. Felt like standing on the edge of something vast, something waiting. He took a long breath, as though steadying himself. "I need to tell you something." My heart kicked hard against my ribs. "Okay." He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from years of work, then back at me. His voice, when it came, was low and raw. "You've been through hell, and I've tried to just be here to give you space to not make this about me. But the truth is," his words faltered, "the truth is, I care about you, more than I thought I would, more than I probably should." The world tilted under me. I had imagined this moment in quiet, desperate daydreams, but hearing it aloud left me speechless. He went on, his voice breaking slightly. "I don't want to scare you. I don't want to push. But every time I see you smile, every time I hear you laugh, it feels like watching someone step back into the light, and I can't pretend it doesn't mean everything to me." My throat tightened. For so long, I had convinced myself I was unlovable, a burden no one wanted to carry. And here was this man, steady, strong, scarred in his own ways, telling me I was worth something to him. "I'm afraid," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I know how to love without breaking it. I don't know if I can give you what you deserve." He shook his head, firm. "I don't need perfect. I don't need you to be anyone other than who you are right now. Just honest. Just here." I felt the tears gathering, hot and relentless. "I want to stay," I whispered. "I don't want to run anymore. And I think I want you, even if I'm scared." His hand moved slowly, deliberately, resting over mine. The weight of it was grounding, his warmth seeping into me. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the ranger who had found me in the woods, but the man who had kept me alive since. The silence stretched, taut with all the words we hadn't said. And then, finally, he leaned in. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't rushed. He moved with the same steady patience he'd shown me since the moment we met, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. My breath caught, my chest tightened, and when his lips brushed mine, the world went quiet. The kiss was tender, almost hesitant at first, as if we were both afraid it would break the fragile peace we'd built. But then it deepened, not in passion but in emotion. It was a release, a surrender, a promise carried in the softness of lips and the press of hands. I let the tears fall as I kissed him back, not out of sorrow, but out of the overwhelming relief that I wasn't invisible anymore, that someone saw me, chose me, wanted me alive. When we finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm against my skin. "You're here," he whispered. "That's all I ever wanted." And for the first time in years, I didn't just believe it. I felt it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was choosing to live, choosing to love, choosing him. The days after our first kiss felt both ordinary and extraordinary. We still cooked the same simple meals, walked the same forest trails, and tended the same fire at night. But every moment carried a new charge, a quiet certainty that something had shifted. The silence between us was no longer heavy with questions. It was comfortable, warm, threaded with the knowledge that what had been unspoken was now real. I found myself watching him differently, noticing details that felt newly precious. The way his brow furrowed when he read a map, the way he hummed softly when he worked with his hands, the way his eyes softened whenever they landed on me. For years, I had felt like a burden, like someone too broken to deserve love. But with him, I wasn't a project to be fixed. I was simply me, and that was enough. One crisp morning, we sat on the porch with steaming mugs of coffee. The sun was just breaking over the treeline, painting the forest in pale gold. He glanced at me, then at the horizon, and said quietly, "You ever think about what comes next?" The question made my chest tighten. Once, next had been something I avoided, too painful, too heavy. But now, with his hand brushing against mine, I allowed myself to imagine. "I think about it all the time now," I admitted. "Not in the way I used to. Before, I thought about endings. Now, I think about beginnings." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good, because I don't want you to leave here feeling like this was temporary. You deserve more than just surviving a few days in the woods. You deserve a life, whatever that looks like." I swallowed hard, my voice unsteady. "And you? What do you deserve?" His eyes softened. "Maybe the same thing. Maybe we deserve to figure it out together." The word together settled deep in me, warmer than the coffee in my hands. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in someone else's life. I was part of something that might last. We didn't rush into grand promises or declarations. Instead, we spoke of small, tangible things. Planting a garden in the spring, teaching me how to navigate deeper trails, maybe even fixing up the old shed behind the cabin. One step at a time. Each plan was simple, but to me it felt like building a future brick by brick. That night, as we sat by the fire, I leaned against him for the first time without hesitation. His arms slipped around my shoulders, pulling me close, and I let myself rest there, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I used to think I had no place in this world," I whispered, "that I was too broken to matter." His hand tightened gently on my arm. "And now," I tilted my head back, meeting his gaze. The firelight flickered across his face, softening his strong features. "Now I think, maybe my place is right here, with you." Emotion flickered in his eyes, something unspoken but undeniable. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head, lingering there as though sealing a promise. The lesson wasn't lost on me. Life hadn't suddenly become easy. The shadows of my past would always be there, the scars etched into me forever. But love had shown me that scars weren't proof of weakness. They were proof of survival. And survival, when shared, could blossom into something beautiful. I thought of how I had stumbled into the woods hoping to disappear, and instead I had been found. Sometimes the right person finds you when you've lost yourself completely. Sometimes salvation doesn't come in grand gestures, but in the steady presence of someone who refuses to let you fall. As the fire dwindled to embers, I shifted, threading my fingers through his. His hand was large, calloused, steady, the kind of hand that could guide, protect, and hold without letting go. I squeezed it, grounding myself in the reality that I had chosen. Not death, not despair, but life and love. "I don't know what tomorrow will look like," I said softly, "but for the first time in a long time, I want to find out." He turned his head, brushing his lips against my temple. "That's all I ask. One day at a time. Together." In that moment, leaning against him with his hand clasped in mine, the weight of years of pain seemed lighter. For once, I wasn't haunted by the past or terrified of the future. I was here, present, alive, and at peace. And as I drifted to sleep that night in his arms, I knew with absolute certainty, I had chosen life. I had chosen love. And in choosing both, I had finally chosen myself. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Sometimes the right person finds us when we feel most lost. If you believe in second chances, in healing, and in love that saves, I invite you to subscribe for more stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments. Has someone ever reminded you of your worth when you couldn't see it yourself? And don't forget to like this video so more people can find hope in these words. Until next time, thank you for listening.